So today we're going to interview Mary O'Donnell, who has a history of living in Nipigon, and she's just going to give us a little bit of information about her family, which is very extensive, and some of the information when she was growing up here. Okay, Mary.
Okay. My name is Mary, and I am the seventh daughter of Mary MacDonald. That was my mother's name, Mary MacDonald. And we lived down at the Mud Flats. I was born at the Mud Flats. I'm not sure, I know that I am the last one in our family born at the Mud Flats. And I was born in 1947. So my mother had 8 children. 7 of us lived. And she had 7 daughters and 1 boy. My brother Ernie, I was the baby of the family, so they were all quite older than I was. But my brother Ernie raised his family in Red Rock. So actually the railway tracks became a route for us to go visit Ernie. We used to walk over to Red Rock by the way of the railroad tracks, and his son used to walk over to the Mud Flats via the railroad tracks. So that was important to us when we were kids. We knew where to pick blueberries and strawberries and raspberries. Okay, so yes.
Maybe name your sisters then, so
Okay.
that we get that connection, Mary.
So I am the youngest. My name is Mary. Then the next is Eunice. And the next is Kathy McLeod. The next is Marge Sobush. And the next is Selena Chilo Pelche. And then Ernie is in there, Ernie MacDonald. And then my oldest sister was Evelyn Wright.
See, now that's good you did that, because
Yeah.
now we really get a connection of your family, knowing all of those
Yeah,
names.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
So none of us moved away. We all stayed here in Nipigon. I left when I was 17, though. I had attended school at George O'Neill Public School. So we used to walk from the Mud Flats up to George O'Neill all the time. And living at the Mud Flats, there was no electricity and there was no indoor plumbing. So the transition from growing up and living on the Mud Flats and going up to George O'Neill Public School was, my recall as a child was that it was really bright because there was electric lights and there was porcelain toilets that you could flush, and there was those things that you would step on and the water would come out so you could wash your hands. All of those things were like in my recall as a child, was all of that was really bright. Like I don't know how else to explain it.
That's neat.
Anyway, so then after St. Ed's opened, and I don't even know what year did St. Ed's open.
It's in the 50s anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I went to St. Ed's school, and by that time both my parents had died, and so I was in the care of my sister Selena. So I did grade 8, up to grade 8 at St. Ed's.
Can you remember who the principal was, Mary?
Yes, one principal I remember was Jerry Rhodes, and the other principal was a lady.
We talked about her, tall lady.
Oh my God, I had her name just before.
And I know who you mean,
Yeah,
too.
okay,
Yeah.
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 So, yeah, I was good in school. I was smart. I won a regional spelling bee for St. Ed's School. I have a little plaque, and I won best all-around student or whatever for grade 8. So I was smart. And then I went to high school at Red Rock, and we rode the bus every day. And there were no other, well, there were maybe about 6 Indians in the school that I remember.
In the high school?
In the high school, yes. So, I don't know what happened to everybody. Decided not to go. Anyway, I went, and I was doing okay. My recall in being at high school was that we had to take 3 languages. We took English, Latin, and French as subjects in school. I always enjoyed it. enjoyed that because it was like a lot of memorization and regurgitation. So education, that was the model for us. That's how we were marked, on how much we could remember.
When I think back to taking Latin, what a waste that really was. I think once in a while I'll think, oh, that those words go together because of Latin, but I took Latin too and never had a use for it really. Yeah, it was interesting, really.
Yeah, and I took typing. That always served me, having had that typing background. Even today, still using those keyboarding skills.
Right.
So then I dropped out of school in grade 11, and I moved to Sault Ste. Marie. And since I've been there, I've been employed, and I've had a very successful work career. I started out working in an organization called Women in Crisis because I had graduated from university. I'd gone back and got my bachelor's in political science and sociology as an adult student. So I graduated from that, and then Women in Crisis hired me as a counselor. And then I worked with youth in detention, and then I got hired by the local community college. And once I was hired there, I was a part-time counselor, and I worked there for 13 years, and I progressed to, when I retired, I was a dean of Native Education.
Wow.
So I credit, I guess, my basic schooling, like the elementary, the secondary schooling, as my success in being able to be a good worker and succeed. So my memories of Nipigon are with my mom. I remember we used to love going to the theater. I'm trying to remember, the Dwyers ran it then, yes.
Right.
And that was one of my happiest memories, was going to see The King and I with my mom there. As kids, we used to always look forward to going to the theater and getting those Cremex bars or whatever, the ice cream things. Making glasses out of the popcorn boxes. Not glasses, but you know what I mean.
The binoculars.
Yeah, and we'd shape them, Yeah, so my recall on Nipigon were always like adventurous. We used to go, we had strawberry patches where we went picking wild strawberries, where we went picking raspberries. I remember going picking blueberries with our mom. We used to sell them to Zechner's store. That was an income source for us.
Now, where were the blueberries? Locally, or you went somewhere?
We used to go not far. We used to go up on the highway.
Up in Ivanhill, I bet.
Yes. We used to go to Ivanhill.
Okay.
And then going towards Red Rock. I can't remember the name. Just by the creek.
Stillwater Creek.
Yeah,
there?
by Stillwater Creek up on the mountains there. We used to go picking. Yeah, and that was always an adventure because we brought lunches and we had tea, and it was like never just for an hour or anything. It was like a day trip, and so those things were all good.
So your family had a vehicle then?
No.
Oh.
Never had a vehicle. My brother did after he was married and would come home and get us.
So how did you get to Ivanhill?
Well, that was like, we were talking about that the other day, and we were wondering if maybe Zechner's provided a ride out because we picked for them and then they came back and got us. I don't know.
Okay.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
It's a little mystery.
It's a little bit too far to walk.
Well, you could.
You could,
Yeah.
But if you were picking a lot of blueberries, you're pretty hard to bring them back.
Yeah,
if you were walking.
Yes,
right.
yes, yeah. Because like going down to the mission was, everybody did that. I used to do that as a kid. We'd go down, we played with the kids at the mission, so we'd walk from Nipigon out to the mission. So going up Ivanhill's not that much further.
So did your family fish at all?
Yes. My uncle Joe Delarone lived with us, and he used to take us out in the punt, and he'd set nets, and Yeah, fishing. But one of my recall for a happy one is the Dampiers, because my mom always talked about the Dampiers in a really positive, happy light that he shared. Like my sisters talk about going down to the boats and waiting for the Dampiers to come in, and he always gave fish to the families.
Okay.
Yeah, very generous.
Right.
Yeah.
Someone else commented on the same thing as you did, that he was always sharing his catch of
Yes,
fish
right.
with
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
So you grew up eating a lot of fish, obviously. Or
Yeah,
did-
we lived off the land.
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you picked all those berries, you sold them to Zeckner's, but for your own family, did your mom preserve them at all?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like I didn't see that part of my mom, but apparently before I was born, they had a big garden, and my mom did preserves, and, that was part of the lifestyle. But by time I was around, well, I was a change of life baby, so I think she was past 40 by the time I came along. And she was doing things like cleaning for the International Hotel, and
Okay.
doing laundry for people who wanted laundry done,
Right.
because Great Lakes was there down the mudflats.
Right.
The Great Lakes building was there, and then right behind was wash houses, and places where men lived. So I guess she used to do laundry for those men.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Where did your dad work?
My dad worked on the tugboats. That's actually how he died.
Oh.
Yeah, he was working on the booms with Bill Solomon, and there was an accident. One of the other tugs came in too fast, and it started to rock the booms, and they both fell off, hit their
Oh.
heads, and
On the river or Lake Helen?
right down at the mudflats.
Oh, at the mudflats.
Yeah,
Oh my goodness.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
How old were you when then?
10.
10. So your mom then was raising a big family.
Well, my mom had died already.
Oh, she had
Yeah.
two.
Well, sorry, I was 10 when my mom died. I was 11 when my dad died.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so that's why you were saying Selena then was
Yeah,
your
took
character.
us in. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, interesting though about the mud flats, because I keep getting a different perspective of the houses there, and I, like somebody had said there were streets down there, and that really surprised me because I didn't think of that type
Yeah.
of thing.
Well, we lived on one side. I always saw it as a big field. We lived on this side of the field, and then the Dampiers and the Gonians lived on the other side of the field. And it's amazing, the family ties that you feel with people because of us being down the mudflats.
Right,
I don't
right.
know what, but there is family
Yeah,
ties.
it
because
sounded
of
like
that.
it was almost a little community
Yes,
down there
yes,
when other people
yes,
were talking.
yes.
And
So my father was Mike Wabagishik. My father was from Wikwemikong on Manitoulin Island.
oh, okay.
So because of the way things were at that time, my mom had been in residential school and she didn't want us to go, so she didn't register us. So we weren't on the Indian agent's radar to be taken away to residential school.
Oh,
So she wasn't allowed to register us in his name because they hadn't gotten married. So
oh,
I was registered as McDonald, not Wabagishik.
oh, interesting in those days, eh?
And actually, McDonald is not a name that we had as when contact first came. Everybody had their Anishinaabe name, just one name. There was no surnames, but you knew who you were connected to. So our grandfather was going to be sent off to residential school, and he had his Anishinaabe name, but they said you can't go away with a name like that. So they changed his name to Joseph McDonald,
Oh my goodness.
and that's how McDonald name came into our family.
Wow.
And I think I've heard that McDonald was the one that was given because there was local Hudson Bay men that contributed money to the church to help send the Indians off to residential school.
Oh,
So Joseph McDonald was a name that my grandfather was given. That's how we got the name McDonald.
Wow. So, in that sense of changing name like that, was it hard or is it hard to look up your ancestry at all then?
No, actually it isn't,
Oh.
because of the records that the Hudson Bay kept and the church. They were, especially around the signing of the 1850 treaty, they're very keen on getting us to settle down, like the church was trying to get us to settle down, and the government was trying to get us to settle down so they could say, okay, we have this many families here and this is who they are. But every time, like, they would go to find us, we'd be gone. They'd say, oh, they were here last spring, but God, we went back this fall and they were gone. Of course we were gone because we were doing a different activity. So
Right.
it was very hard for them to pin us down. And that was one of the ways they did ultimately, was through surnames.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. So now, after you retired, you're back here now.
Yes. I retired in 2000, and I saw a job posted for the band for historical researcher, and I thought, oh my God, that's me.
Calling
so
you,
I
eh?
put my application in, and I got hired, and I've been doing what I've been working on is the history of Parmachene,
Okay.
the history of the Lake Helen Reserve, the genealogy of the families, the restoration of the St. Sylvester Church and the graveyard there, and then the next one is the mudflats.
Wow, you got a big job ahead of you.
Yeah, so it's been very, very interesting.
Right.
Yes.
And you know what? It's good that you're doing that because, like the interviews we're doing, we're going to lose all that if we don't talk to the
Right.
older people.
Yes.
We are.
Well, as part of my work, I had to work with a professor from Lakehead University. And we were talking one day, and I was telling him about who my ancestors were. And I mentioned the name that my grandmother was Louisa Delarone. He went, Delarone? You're a Delarone? I said, yeah, that's my lineage. He said, well, why didn't you mention that before? And I said, why? What does it matter? Like, for him, it was a big deal. I still don't know why it was a big deal to him that I'm in that Delarone lineage. But anyway, since then, I've been, looking at why. And so I found various things about the Delarones, and there is a rich history that needs to be spoken about in my
Right.
family, because sometimes
Right.
I don't think the younger generation are even aware or care
Right.
that they're part of that lineage.
And so I think that's why we're doing the interviews, is to be able to bring back that, and hopefully younger people will look
Well,
at the interviews.
we go back, like I've traced
Okay,
back
you know what?
5.
We're just at the end of that first
Okay.
one. I'm going to restart it then, and then you
Okay.
can go back on there.
Oh, just like one of the things, like I said, he was keenly interested in us being Delarone, but for us, we always did the lineage back on my mom's side. We've not really done my father's side, and I'm going to start that. But on my mom's side, there's always been like a link with the Hudson Bay, because Shinnewashi was our ancestor, and she married a Hudson Bay factor, and his name was Delarone. So that's where the Delarone name came. So they had 15 children. Okay, and then Charles Delarone, which was our link again, married a woman from Minnesota. And so when my daughter looked up some of the old archives, we've always known, was always told that Anishinaabe, Mishkeke, Indian medicine was in our family, that we had healers in our family. And when my daughter looked up recently for our gathering there, she looked it up, and there listed on the census was Marie Wenagush, and it said Indian doctor on there.
Oh, wow.
So she was recognized, by the people that were doing the census.
And
for
I
that
like
area.
that about old census. They did put down what people did.
Yes.
And they don't anymore because I guess it's confidential or something. But
Yeah.
old ones, you're right. They had
Yeah.
lots of information.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, so that's been like I guess, an impetus for us to get our information documented for those younger generations that are coming up.
Right. Well, I know Art was bragging about all of the history, family history that you
Yeah.
had done
Yeah.
there. He was commenting about
Yeah.
that before to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we could be band members over at Grand Portage. So we're just doing the
Oh.
paperwork on that because
Oh,
of
this-
those linkages.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway.
Interesting. Yeah. So how are you doing with the history of the church and that over there? There's a lot of history in the church alone.
Yes.
I mean, it's I'm going to say worldwide icon, and it is really
is.
because if you see a picture of that church in any magazine, or anything, people know exactly where that church is.
Yes, and
Yeah.
that's my fight for it because I know I believe it was up in the Moose Cree area, if not last year, the year before, they actually took down one of those old
Oh,
churches
did they?
because they despaired of ever trying to, restore.
Right.
And so I don't want that to happen here.
No.
When you look at the priest's house that's there,
Mm-hmm.
like some of the siding is off now, and you look and there's logs like that, They're about that big, that were used in the construction. And I was reading the Jesuit records, and it talks about that church being built and about the Indians going and cutting the logs down in hand-hewn logs. Like they didn't have all the equipment. They, everything was done by hand. And I look at those logs and I think, good God, that's our ancestors. They went in the bush and they did those logs to put that building up. We can't let it go.
No.
We have to look after it. Yeah.
And they have done a little bit of restoration over the years. I know I've taken pictures there before of when they were
yeah.
doing different things. But
Yeah.
I mean, the inside is still so beautiful inside.
Well,
there.
there's hope there. And like now, thank God, Canada is finally taking an interest in keeping our historic buildings, like they're putting money towards them.
Right.
So that's my hope, is that we're going to get the professional help that's going to come in and tell us, okay, these are the things that you can do or need to do. Not just have somebody that's used to putting up drywall come in and,
No.
we actually need a restoration expert.
Right.
And that's what I'm hoping we're going to get. And that's why I want you to do a story on St.
Yes,
Sylvester.
right. That's right. You asked.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. And I just know, as I said, it's an icon worldwide because it's identifiable when you come around that curve on Lake Helen and you
Yes.
see that church there.
Well, like we went back on the records for the Indian Day School, and that day school goes back to 1883. And that church goes back to 1877. So things were happening, like kind of like, in concert.
So, Mary, when I first moved here, there was still the school
yes.
at Lake Helen.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was still that school there. So I'm surprised that some people. Oh, but you lived here. That's why you went to George O'Neill.
Yes.
Or Nipigon Public School, I
Yeah.
guess, in those days. But
Yes.
I definitely remember.
Well, they closed that one in 1967.
I have
The
a
Indian
picture
Day School.
of the teacher. I took a picture of her when they retired.
Yeah.
When she retired. But I remember going over there a few times.
Yeah.
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 And that was too bad, really, that it disappeared too. But I guess it wasn't big enough, maybe to keep
Yeah,
it going.
there was one down by the church, and then they shut that one down. Then they moved it to where the old band office was. That
okay.
was the one that closed in '67.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting, really, that
it
was.
is.
That
And
was
some of
there.
the burial sites are really old too.
Yes, I can imagine.
Yeah, we found them going back to 18. I think the first one was 1884 or something like that.
Because some of your cemetery's been restored a little bit too.
We're trying.
Yeah,
Yes.
compared to a few years ago,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
it's looking quite good now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So much history there.
Yes.
Right. And I think that the Red Rock Indian Band has a lot of history.
Yes.
A lot of history. When you look back at E.C. Everett's photos, it's too bad there wasn't somebody who could still identify some of the pictures that he took over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, he preserved a lot of your history in photos.
Yeah.
Have you ever come here and looked at his photos?
I've looked at some stuff, but not as much as I could have or should
Right.
have. It's so time consuming.
Oh, it is.
You know,
Right, right, right.
But yeah, like I always tell people, like we were here at Contact. We were here at Contact. So
Right.
yes,
Yeah.
we have a long history here.
Yeah, and it's so important, isn't it, that we record your history like that. And kudos to you for doing all that work over there. Have you got a timeline, Mary, on doing all of that?
Well, my contract actually ends on February 28th. That's like me. I'm done. I said I'd put a year, and so I've done a year. But I've identified those key areas. We've done a lot of work. We've applied for money to keep it going for 2 more years, and ideally that's going to happen. We'll get that funding.
Right.
Yeah.
And you'll be lucky to get it all done in 2 years.
Yes.
There's so
yeah.
much.
Oh yeah, there's so much.
So much.
Yes.
So are you pleased really with some of the records that you're able to find? Like, did people really keep pretty good records, or
No.
no?
No. Like right now, what we're relying on is Hudson Bay Archives, Jesuit writings, and then there was the occasional like artist that came through. Armstrong. Armstrong has done some really neat pictures in this area. I can't recall any that Paul Kane did. I don't know if you are aware. Anyway, there were a few artists.
Right.
Edward Curtis. So we need to find what they did in
Right.
this area.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
A lot of work to
Well,
be done.
nice that you're able to do that, because it's such a time-consuming job. I can
Yeah.
imagine for you
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
Right.